My friends watching at home, welcome to another edition of Charlie Goldberg Live, part 2 of our Rick Kirkham series. So before you watch this part, there is spoilers ahead, so tune into last week's episode to get the scoop on Rick Kirkham on Tiger King, to find out about his stint as the Adventure Man, and to see his career as a whole. However, outside of all those things, Rick's life is like an iceberg. With all the positives on his career being at the top, the bottom is a lot of things people haven't seen at the time. Rick's had issues. He's had substance abuse issues, hardships at home, and hardships mentally. In fact, there's even a movie about Rick's life. It's called TV Junkie. It's a film documentary about Rick's addiction and how he ended up overcoming it. Rick is such an inspirational man, and I'm so honored to be able to speak to him about his hardships here today. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the show, my friend, Rick Kirkham. All right, and ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of Charlie Goldberg Live. Once again, I'm here with Rick Kirkham once again. Rick, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hi, Charlie. Always nice to visit with you.
Of course. And this week, we're going to go a little bit more deeper into your life, Lee Hood. It's a little bit more of a serious edition of Charlie Goldberg Live, but if you haven't checked out the first episode, last week's edition, Rick talks about Tiger King and being the Adventure Man on Inside Edition. So go check that out before you listen to tonight. But right now, we're going to talk about your movie. It's called TV Junkie. It's about your life and your addictions to substances and you eventually overcoming them through all of your hardships. Rick, I'm so honored to have you on the show today, and let's get right to it. All right. So, as I said, you had a rough childhood, and through all the hardships in your life, you still managed to meet your best friend. This was a movie camera you received on your 14th birthday. And with that camera, you basically recorded everything in your life, with over 3,200 hours of footage showing some of the great moments in your life, like the birth of your children and you proposing to your first wife, Tammy. However, on this camera, there was a lot more bad than good with your substance abuse issues. Rick, why do you think it's so important for your younger viewers to know your past, so open and so raw?
Well, Charlie, addiction is a terrible thing, and a lot of people tend to hide their addictions because of embarrassment and the problems that it creates. I decided in making TV Junkie that I would go ahead and expose my addiction problem with cocaine. But to understand why, you have to go way back on why I even began making the movie TV Junkie. When I was 14 and got that movie camera you mentioned, I started doing video diaries of myself. Instead of writing down a journal, I would turn on a camera and talk to a camera and do a diary. And I did that for almost 35 years. So that in combination with the fact that I was a TV reporter for that 35 years, I had all the video from being a TV reporter, and I had all the video from being me and my diaries that a friend suggested we melt them all together and it would make an entire movie, which it did. And it took us 6 years to make TV Junkie. But as such, the diaries that I made over the years, I also made diaries when I was abusing drugs and when I was taking the drugs. And some of those scenes are very disturbing, and those are the scenes that you see in TV Junkie.
Definitely. And as someone who's watched TV Junkie, it's not a really easy film to sit through. However, I feel like the importance of it weighs out being able to watch it or not, because it really inspires people to overcome all their hardships, or it tells people, you know what, drugs aren't great. Let's not get into them. And that's why I admire you so much. It's one of the reasons why I admire you so much. Now, at the time of your addiction, when you were the main reporter for Inside Edition, you got to interview a plethora of celebrities, including then president at the time, George Bush. How did your addiction impact your job performance and really your on-air talent abilities?
It's funny that you mentioned my interview with President George Bush because I was actually still high on crack cocaine when I did that interview.
Oh, wow.
I had been eating crack all night the night before, and Chuck Norris had a tennis event for charity down in Texas. And the president was there, and just on the spur of the moment, I asked Chuck, could I interview the president? He said, sure. I was still high on cocaine when I interviewed the president of the United States. So the drugs definitely were a part of my life. And I was, At Inside Edition, I was traveling quite a bit. I was on an airplane at least once or twice a day all over the world doing news stories. And wherever I would go, I needed a pick-me-up, a boost. And so I would do cocaine because I was so tired. Also, some of the stories that I did were so hardcore. I did a lot of murder stories. I saw a lot of bodies, a lot of terrible things. And the cocaine helped me get away and escape. But the addiction was a terrible, terrible thing, but it was part of my life for nearly a decade. And I wasn't afraid to expose that in TV Junkie.
Definitely. And there was definitely no shortage of exposure to
Yeah.
your addiction in the film. So I got to ask, now at the time you were married to your first wife, Tammy, and while she was on the verge of giving birth to your first son, you checked into rehab for the first time. However, it didn't really work out as you thought it would, as you ended up going back to drugs after that session. So talk to me about your first time in rehab, and do you think that your first time in rehab ultimately failed?
Yeah, I didn't voluntarily go into rehab. The producers at Inside Edition, it was obvious that I had a drug problem. I came out of the program and I stayed clean for nearly 6 months.
Wow.
But in that 6 month time, I had moved back to Texas to be with Tammy. We'd had our first son, and the pressures of being away from work and then having to leave the child when he was only a month old and go back to work drove me back to the cocaine, and I was back doing it again.
I'm sure. And, a life on the road is not easy. And as bad as it is, it kind of makes sense as to why you put yourself through all that addiction at that point.
Yeah, I traveled so much. I had been given awards from American Airlines and Delta Airlines for having traveled 1 million miles on each of their airlines. Unfortunately, in my marriage, it didn't allow me to spend much time with my wife or my son, and then my second son when he came along. But I eventually got into trouble at work because I had taken time off after being held hostage in an interview that I had done. I was held at gunpoint for a full day after an interview went bad in Los Angeles. And I ended up going down and getting some psychological help for that. At the same time, I was still doing the cocaine. So I was really messed up for about a year there and finally ended up losing my job at Inside Edition because of it.
That seems like a rock bottom moment for you. And in the film, we've seen a lot of different rock bottom moments for you. When you attempted suicide, in my opinion, that was the biggest one. Thank God your suicide attempt was unsuccessful. But ironically, in that moment, after your unsuccessful attempt, you actually saw a picture of your first two sons, Ricky and Dustin, and you decided to turn your life around. The irony of that is, of course, that suicide attempt of yours led to you basically gaining your life back, your livelihood back. Now, describe to me that moment where you saw that picture and your emotions in your head.
That particular moment, I was ready to blow my brains out, and I had a shotgun with me, and I had decided that I'd come to an end. I'd lost my career, my marriage was kaput, and I felt like I would never be a good father for my sons because of the cocaine addiction. But I can remember looking up. I was in the car and looking up and seeing a picture I had in the visor of my two sons. And it just struck me, you know what? This is a turning point. It's either now or never. You're at the point of ending your life. And I was. But that looking at their picture, something hit me and said, no, I can change this. I can get clean. I can come back. I can be a good father. And hopefully, I believe that's what I did.
Really inspires people, like I said before, to not get into the life path you have gotten into and to, overcome all their hardships. And for that, you are such an amazing influence.
It was our hope in making the film and making it so raw and so hard to watch that people who did see it, it might affect them and maybe help them if they had a drug problem, that it would get out and touch the masses, so to speak, when it came to the fact that we're all just human and some of us suffer from addiction. Apparently it worked because the film went to Sundance Film Festival in 2006 and won the special prize for documentary. And of course, then it followed up, it was on HBO, and then later on it was on Netflix. And I still get emails today from people saying, thank you for saving my life TV Junkie saved my life. So it's a very good feeling that we did what we wanted to do.
That's amazing. And obviously well deserved for those emails. Now, you said before that you want to reach out and touch masses. So my question for you is, if you saw a kid struggling with crack or a cocaine addiction, what would you say to them?
You know, Charlie, I've had many people, even recently, who reach out to me personally on the social media, asking, or telling me about their problem. They've hit rock bottom and asking me, what can I do? Well, can you help me? I always take the time to people I don't know around the world. I take the time to talk to them and tell them there's always hope. As long as you're living and breathing, there's always hope. And there's somewhere that you can get help. If you can't help yourself, ask for it. Don't be afraid. Don't be embarrassed. People are not going to label you for the rest of your life. It all depends on you asking for help. And so I always take time to talk to people individually and in groups. I spent 2 years speaking to juvenile prisoners and to churches and to schools, speaking about drugs and addiction and how to get help right after TV Junkie. I haven't been speaking that much, in the last few years, but if the opportunity came up, I'd happily go back out into the community just to help anybody I could.
That's incredible. And with your life now, you said that there's hope, and definitely you flipped your life around. From that rock bottom moment, you have really changed everything. Right now, you're across the world in Norway. You have a new wife who you love very much. I've seen all the great Facebook posts, and you're really just enjoying life, and it's just a great sight to see.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm a very lucky man, and I believe that luck comes from trying to do good for other people. Good things have now happened to me, and as you say, I'm very happy, and I live a very good life right now with the woman I love. I have 2 sons who are grown now. One of them's coming back to visit me for the second time in Norway next month. So if we could just get all this Corona business out of the way and we can all get back out to the world, let's all just love each other and get along.
Definitely. And for that, you are such an inspiration. And I would like to thank you once again for being on the show. And just to everyone watching at home, going through hardships and everything like that, just remember, there's always hope. Thank you so much, Rick.
You bet. Thank you, Charlie. Always good to visit with you.
It's always great to have you.
Thank you.